I am Isabella Brown, 36 years old, and I sold my artificial intelligence company for $1 billion last year. My younger sister, Sophia, was always the golden child, the stunning one everyone adored. My husband, Alexander, was the sophisticated investment banker who charmed his way into my heart. I never imagined they would be the ones plotting to end my life. The memory still burns in my mind. Sophia whispering those chilling words, "Say goodbye to the world, Izzy," as she pushed me from our luxury yacht into the freezing Atlantic waters. Alexander just stood there with that cold smile, watching me disappear beneath the waves. But they never expected what would happen next. Before I take you through this incredible journey of betrayal and justice, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that subscribe button if you want more shocking stories of family deception and ultimate revenge. Trust me, you'll want to see how the story ends. I grew up in Miami with my sister Sophia, who was 3 years younger than me. From childhood, we were complete opposites in every possible way. While I was methodical and academically focused, Sophia was magnetic and effortlessly captivating. I spent weekends programming on our old computer and building small robotics projects, while Sophia was winning modeling contests and gathering admirers wherever she went. Our parents, both hardworking immigrants who owned a small restaurant, tried their best to support our different paths. But I always felt they connected with Sophia more naturally. They would glow with pride at her pageant victories and social achievements, while my academic honors earned polite applause. It wasn't that they didn't love me. Sophia just had this natural ability to command attention that I never possessed. My passion for technology ignited when I was 13. Our computer teacher, Mrs. Chen, saw something in me that others overlooked. She gave me advanced coding challenges and stayed after school to teach me programming languages beyond the standard curriculum. "You have an extraordinary gift, Isabella," she told me once. "Your mind processes complex problems in ways most people cannot comprehend." Those words became my foundation during the difficult years ahead. College was a financial nightmare. I juggled 4 part-time jobs to pay for my computer science degree at University of Miami. Morning coffee shop shifts, afternoon tutoring sessions, evening data entry work, and weekend tech repairs for local businesses. Meanwhile, Sophia received a full scholarship to study communications, along with additional support from our parents who borrowed heavily to cover her expenses. I never felt bitter about this. Sophia had a gift for making everyone believe her dreams were worth their investment. During those exhausting years, I barely slept. When I wasn't working or studying, I was coding in my cramped studio apartment, developing the algorithm that would eventually revolutionize artificial intelligence. I was obsessed with creating AI systems that could understand and respond to human emotions through digital interactions. Most experts dismissed it as impossible, which only strengthened my determination to prove them wrong. After graduation, I accepted a junior programming position at a tech startup while continuing my personal project during nights and weekends. 4 years later, I had created a working prototype of what I called Emotional Response Intelligence, or ERI. It was groundbreaking. An AI system that could analyze text patterns, voice inflections, and digital behavior to accurately interpret emotional states and respond with appropriate empathy. I quit my job and founded Emotitech with my life savings of $48,000. The first 3 years were brutal beyond description. Investors would be impressed by demonstrations but withdraw when they discovered a young Latino woman with no business connections was the founder. I heard innovative concept but too risky countless times. I nearly gave up on multiple occasions. Throughout this struggle, Sophia was pursuing her modeling career in Los Angeles. She had the beauty for it, but at 5 feet 6 inches, agencies considered her too short for high fashion work. Every few months, she would call me in tears about rent she couldn't afford or car payments she couldn't make. Despite my own financial struggles, I always sent whatever I could spare. "You're my safety net, Izzy," she would say, using the childhood nickname only she was allowed to use. "I don't know what I'd do without my brilliant big sister." The breakthrough for Emotitech came when my algorithm successfully identified early depression indicators in users of a major social media platform during a pilot study. Suddenly, mental health applications became apparent, and investors started pursuing me instead of the reverse. Within 2 years, Emotitech expanded from 4 employees to 150, with a valuation reaching $60 million. That's when I encountered Alexander Wilson at an AI investment summit in New York City. He represented everything I wasn't: tall, classically handsome, socially polished, and from established wealth. As an investment banker specializing in technology acquisitions, he approached me after my keynote presentation with insightful questions about my technology's potential applications. I was accustomed to men in the industry either condescending to me or attempting to steal my concepts. Alexander seemed genuinely fascinated by both my work and me personally. He pursued me with determination, sending orchids to my office, arranging coincidental encounters at industry conferences, and eventually inviting me to dinner at exclusive restaurants I'd never imagined entering. Romance had never been my focus, but something about his persistent attention broke through my carefully constructed barriers. When he kissed me on our 4th date, I experienced emotions I had suppressed for years while building my company. Our relationship accelerated rapidly. Within 10 months, we were married in an intimate ceremony in the Florida Keys. Sophia served as my maid of honor, shedding what appeared to be genuine tears of happiness. "You deserve every bit of joy in the world, Izzy," she told me, embracing me tightly after the ceremony. "I'm so proud to call you my sister." In those moments, the competitive tension that had always existed between us seemed to vanish completely. I believed her words with my whole heart. Alexander integrated himself into every aspect of my life after our marriage. He offered strategic business advice, connected me with influential people in finance, and even suggested I make him Chief Financial Officer of Emotitech. I hesitated at this request, and for the first time, I saw a flash of coldness in his eyes. It passed quickly, replaced with understanding. "Of course, you built this company. I just want to contribute to your success however I can." I appreciated his respect for my boundaries, not realizing it was merely a tactical retreat. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a carefully orchestrated plan that would nearly cost me everything. Then came the deal that changed everything. Tech Global Corporation, one of the largest technology companies in the world, offered to acquire Emotitech for $1 billion. The number was staggering beyond belief. My board of directors urged me to accept, pointing out that Tech Global's resources would help scale my technology to reach millions of people globally. After weeks of intense negotiation, I agreed with conditions that protected my core team and ensured the technology would be used ethically. The day the deal closed, Alexander organized a celebration at our new mansion in the Hollywood Hills. As we toasted with champagne, I caught a strange look between him and Sophia, who had flown in for the occasion. It was brief, a moment of silent communication that struck me as odd, but not alarming. I was too overwhelmed by the sudden wealth to pay much attention. $1 billion. The girl from Miami who worked 4 jobs to pay for college was now one of the richest women in America. If only I had known what that money would cost me. 18 months into my marriage and 6 months after the billion-dollar acquisition, I began noticing subtle changes in Alexander. The man who once couldn't bear to be apart from me now had frequent business trips to cities I'd never heard him mention before. His loving morning texts became sporadic. He started taking phone calls in another room, his voice dropping to a whisper whenever I approached. At first, I attributed these changes to normal relationship evolution. The honeymoon phase doesn't last forever, and we were both busy professionals adjusting to our new wealth. But then Sophia began appearing at our Hollywood mansion with increasing frequency. "The modeling industry is so brutal right now," she explained when she asked to stay with us for a few weeks, just until I figure out my next career move. Those weeks turned into months. I welcomed her presence initially, thinking it might be nice to rebuild our sisterly bond now that competition for our parents' attention was long behind us. Looking back, I should have paid closer attention to the way she and Alexander interacted. There was an ease between them that went beyond normal in-law friendliness. They shared inside jokes that I wasn't part of. Their conversations would stop abruptly when I entered a room. More than once, I caught Alexander's hand lingering on Sophia's shoulder or touching the small of her back in ways that seemed too intimate for family. One evening, I came home early from a meeting with my financial advisors to find them huddled over Alexander's laptop in his private study. They jumped apart when I entered, and Alexander quickly closed whatever they had been looking at. "Just showing Sophia some investment opportunities," he explained smoothly, "for when she decides what direction to take her career." I nodded, but something felt deeply wrong. That night, I checked our network activity logs, a security measure I had installed when we moved into the mansion. Alexander's computer had accessed our joint financial accounts, specifically the ones containing the bulk of my acquisition money. This wasn't unusual in itself, as Alexander managed much of our personal finances. What concerned me was that these searches focused on transfer limits and international banking regulations for moving large sums of money offshore. The next morning, I confronted him over breakfast. "Is everything okay with our finances? I noticed you were researching large international transfers last night." Alexander's face remained completely impassive, but his coffee cup paused halfway to his lips. "Just routine planning. With wealth like ours, we need to be strategic about asset protection and diversification." He smiled and added, "You know finance bores you, Isabella. Trust me to handle this part of our life." He was right that investment strategies weren't my expertise, but something in his dismissive tone raised every alarm bell in my head. For the first time since our wedding, I wondered if I truly knew the man I had married. That afternoon, I called Lucas Hill, a private investigator recommended by my company's former security chief. "I need thorough background checks on 2 people," I told him discreetly, "and I need complete discretion." While waiting for Lucas's findings, I began paying closer attention to Alexander and Sophia's movements around the house. They seemed to find excuses to be alone together, whether it was shopping trips to Beverly Hills or long walks along the beach near our home. Twice, I pretended to be on important business calls while actually listening to their conversations in the next room, but they spoke in vague terms that revealed nothing concrete. 3 days later, Lucas called with preliminary results that made my blood run cold. "Mrs. Brown, I found some very concerning information about your husband's financial history," he said carefully. "Before meeting you, Alexander Wilson was nearly bankrupt due to failed hedge fund investments and substantial gambling debts to some very dangerous people. He had taken out several high-interest loans from questionable sources that were suddenly paid off shortly after your marriage." My stomach tightened. "And my sister?" "Miss Brown has significant credit card debt across multiple accounts, totaling over $200,000. She's also been making large cash deposits into an offshore account over the past 4 months, totaling about $150,000. The source of these funds is unclear." After hanging up, I sat in my home office trying to process this devastating information. The Alexander I thought I knew was financially successful and responsible. Had our entire relationship been built on lies? And where was Sophia getting that kind of money? I made a decision that would change everything. Under the pretense of upgrading our home security system, I installed hidden cameras in common areas of the mansion, including Alexander's study. I told our home staff they had a paid week off, claiming Alexander and I wanted privacy for a romantic getaway. The first 2 days yielded nothing unusual on the cameras. On the third day, I had a scheduled meeting with tech global executives and told Alexander I would be gone all day. Instead, I left for 2 hours, then parked down the street and accessed the security feed from my tablet. What I saw confirmed my worst fears and shattered my world completely. Alexander and Sophia were in his study, not in a romantic embrace as I had partly suspected, but reviewing documents that looked horrifyingly familiar. My financial statements, my will, and what appeared to be life insurance policies. Once it's done, how soon can we access the funds? Sophia asked, her voice cold and calculating, in a way I had never heard before. Alexander pointed to something on a paper spread across his desk. The succession plan transfers control immediately in case of accidental death. Isabella updated her will after the acquisition, naming you as her sole heir, since we have no children. With both the will and the life insurance policies, we'll have full legal access within days of her death. Sophia smiled in a way that made my blood freeze. It was predatory, hungry, completely devoid of any sisterly love. And they'll never find her body in the open ocean. Perfect accident scenario. The yacht trip next week is our opportunity, Alexander replied, his voice as casual as if they were discussing dinner plans. We'll never get a better chance. Once we're far enough from shore, no witnesses, no chance of rescue. My hands shook so violently I nearly dropped the tablet. They were planning to murder me. My husband and sister were conspiring to kill me for my money, and they were discussing it like a business transaction. The betrayal was so enormous, so complete, that I could barely comprehend its scope. These weren't strangers or enemies. These were the two people I loved most in the world, planning my death with cold precision. I drove aimlessly through Hollywood Hills for hours, my mind racing between disbelief, rage, and a growing determination to survive. My first instinct was to confront them, to scream and demand to know how they could plot something so monstrous against someone who loved them unconditionally. But a deeper survival instinct kept me from acting rashly. If I confronted them now, they might accelerate their timeline or find another way to eliminate me. I needed to be smarter than they were, more prepared. That evening, I returned home and performed the most difficult acting job of my life. I smiled through dinner as Alexander discussed the yacht trip he had planned for the following week. I thought we could use a second honeymoon, he said, reaching for my hand across the table with what I now recognized as completely fake affection. 2 weeks aboard the Ocean's Dream, sailing down the Mexican coast, just you, me, and the open sea. That sounds absolutely wonderful, I replied, forcing enthusiasm into my voice, while my skin crawled at his touch. Will it be just us? Actually, Sophia chimed in brightly, Alexander invited me along. I hope that's okay, Izzy. I've always wanted to see the Mexican Riviera, and I could use some time away from the city. I met her eyes, searching desperately for any sign of the sister I had grown up with, the girl who had once held my hand on the first day of school and promised we would always protect each other. All I saw was a stranger wearing my sister's face, planning my murder. Of course, I said, my voice steady despite the horror churning in my stomach. It'll be wonderful, the three of us together. That night, I lay awake beside Alexander, listening to his steady breathing and wondering how someone could sleep so peacefully after planning murder. Every sound he made filled me with revulsion. The man I had thought I loved was a killer, and I was his target. I had 6 days to prepare for a trip that was designed to be my last. The Ocean's Dream was everything a luxury yacht should be. 90 feet of gleaming white perfection with 5 staterooms, a hot tub on the upper deck, a full galley, and a crew of 8 to cater to our every need. Under different circumstances, I would have been awed by its opulence and the crystal-clear waters of the Mexican coast. Instead, as we boarded in San Diego Harbor, I felt like I was walking onto the stage for my own execution. Every smile from Alexander felt like a knife twisted in my back. Every casual touch from Sophia made my skin crawl with the knowledge of her true intentions. I spent the previous days making careful preparations that could mean the difference between life and death. I told my assistant, Emma Allen, about my suspicions, giving her a sealed envelope with detailed instructions to open if she didn't hear from me for 72 consecutive hours. I activated location tracking on all my personal devices and created a new emergency email account that would send automated messages to specific people, my lawyer, Lucas Hill, and several business associates if I didn't log in within 48 hours. Most importantly, I transferred $20 million to a hidden account that only I could access, separate from all the assets Alexander knew about. If I somehow survived what they were planning, I would need resources they couldn't control. The first 4 days on the yacht passed in a haze of false normalcy that felt like torture. We sunbathed on the deck, swam in the turquoise waters, and dined on exquisite meals prepared by the yacht chef. The crew was always present during daylight hours, which I believed kept Alexander and Sophia from acting on their murderous plan. Safety and witnesses, I thought grimly, watching them laugh and play the roles of loving husband and devoted sister. By the 5th day, we had traveled far from the Mexican coast. Captain Rodriguez mentioned during dinner that we were in open water, approximately 120 miles from the nearest land. The isolation was exactly what my potential killers had been waiting for. That evening, Sophia suggested the crew deserved a night off from serving us dinner, insisting we could manage ourselves for one meal. Alexander quickly agreed, telling Captain Rodriguez to give everyone the evening off in their quarters. "We want some private family time," he explained with that charming smile that had once melted my heart. As the sun set over the vast Pacific, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, Alexander prepared cocktails on the upper deck. "A special recipe," he said, handing me a brightly colored drink with a pineapple garnish. "I made it extra strong, just how you like it, darling." I pretended to sip while actually letting the liquid spill down the side of the glass away from his view. "Delicious," I murmured, and then set it down on a table when he turned to make Sophia's drink. Over the next hour, I feigned increasing drowsiness, slurring my words and becoming unsteady on my feet. It was another performance, but this one was for my life. "I think I need to lie down," I said, intentionally stumbling as I stood. "I feel so dizzy all of a sudden." Alexander was immediately at my side, his arm around my waist in a show of concern that would have seemed loving to anyone watching. But I could feel the tension in his grip, the eagerness poorly disguised as husbandly care. This was it, the moment they had been planning for months. In our stateroom, I collapsed onto the bed, keeping my eyes half closed but maintaining a sliver of vision to monitor Alexander's movements. He checked my responsiveness, waving his hand in front of my face and calling my name softly. Satisfied that whatever drug he had put in my drink had worked, he kissed my forehead with lips that felt like ice against my skin, and left the cabin, locking the door behind him. I waited 15 agonizing minutes before silently moving to the door and pressing my ear against it. I could hear Alexander and Sophia talking on the deck above, their voices carrying through the yacht's ventilation system. "Is she completely out?" Sophia asked, her tone eager and impatient. "Completely," Alexander replied. "I used enough sedative to knock out someone twice her size. She won't wake up even when we move her overboard." Perfect. The crew was all below deck watching some soccer game. We have at least an hour before anyone might notice anything unusual. I quickly changed into dark athletic clothes and water-resistant shoes I had hidden in my luggage. I secured a small, waterproof pouch containing a GPS beacon, emergency cash, and a compact satellite phone around my waist under my shirt. Then I slipped back into bed, resuming my drugged pose just as I heard footsteps approaching in the corridor. The door opened and Alexander entered with Sophia close behind. In the dim cabin light, their faces looked like masks of false concern hiding monstrous intentions. "Time to move her," Alexander said coldly. "Remember, it needs to look like she was sleepwalking or disoriented from alcohol and fell overboard accidentally. No signs of struggle." As they approached the bed, I made a split-second decision that would determine whether I lived or died. Rather than being carried to my fate like a helpless victim, I would confront them and fight for my life. I sat up abruptly, startling them both. "Looking for something?" I asked, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins like fire. The shock on their faces would have been almost comical under different circumstances. Alexander recovered first, his expression shifting from surprise to practiced concern with the skill of a professional actor. "Isabella, you're awake. How are you feeling? You seemed really disoriented earlier. We were just coming to check on you." Sophia stood frozen like a deer in headlights, her eyes darting between Alexander and me with obvious panic. "Drop the act," I said, standing up slowly. "I heard everything. I know about your plan to drug me and throw me overboard. I know about the will, the life insurance, the offshore accounts, all of it." There was a moment of tense silence where I could almost hear their minds racing, deciding whether to continue the charade or abandon it entirely. Then Sophia's face transformed completely. The mask of sisterly affection fell away, replaced by cold contempt and years of hidden resentment. "You were always the smart one, weren't you, Isabella? Always one step ahead, always so perfect. Perfect Isabella with her brilliant minds and her billion-dollar company. Do you have any idea what it's like living in your shadow my entire life?" "How long?" I asked, looking between them. "How long have you been planning to murder me?" Alexander shrugged, no longer bothering to hide his true nature. "Since before our wedding, actually. I needed access to your fortune, and marriage was the most efficient path. Your sister was the perfect inside partner." "You approached me first," Sophia added with ugly satisfaction. "Before he ever met you, he had researched successful women in tech and identified you as a target. He offered me 30% of everything we could steal. I said yes immediately." The betrayal cut deeper than physical pain. So our entire relationship was a lie from the very beginning? Every kiss, every "I love you," every moment you thought we were building a life together, all carefully calculated steps toward this moment. "Enough talking," Sophia snapped impatiently. "This changes nothing except the method. No one will hear her scream out here in the middle of nowhere." Alexander lunged toward me, but I was ready. I dodged to the side, sending him crashing into the bedside table with a satisfying thud. Sophia moved quickly to block my exit from the cabin, but I managed to slip past her smaller frame and ran for the main deck. I made it topside, screaming for help at the top of my lungs, but the yacht's engines were too loud, and the crew quarters were too far away for anyone to hear me. Alexander tackled me from behind, his weight knocking the breath out of my lungs as we crashed to the deck. "Hold her arms," he grunted to Sophia, who grabbed my wrists with surprising strength. I fought with the desperate fury of someone facing death, landing a solid kick to Alexander's stomach that made him double over in pain. I broke free from Sophia's grip and scrambled toward the safety railing, thinking I could jump to the other side of the yacht where the crew might see me. But Alexander recovered too quickly. He seized my hair, yanking me backward with such violence that stars exploded across my vision. Together, he and Sophia dragged me to the edge of the yacht, their hands like iron clamps on my arms.
I clawed at him wildly, drawing blood from Alexander's cheek and leaving scratch marks on Sophia's neck. I fought with every ounce of strength in my body, but they were 2 against 1, and desperation made them incredibly strong. For one heart-stopping moment, as I stared into Sophia's eyes while struggling against our grip, I thought I might have seen a flicker of hesitation, a ghost of the sister I had once loved. "Sophia, please," I gasped, my voice raw from screaming. "We're family. We shared a childhood. Remember when you were scared of thunderstorms and I would hold you until they passed? Remember when I taught you to ride a bike? This isn't you." Her expression wavered for just an instant, and I thought I might have reached some buried part of her humanity. Then her face hardened into cold resolve. She leaned in close, her breath hot against my ear, and whispered the words that still haunt my nightmares. "Say goodbye to the world, Izzy." Then she shoved me hard, her hand striking my chest with shocking force. I felt myself falling backward, Alexander's smiling face and Sophia's cold eyes receding above me as I plummeted toward the dark water. The impact hit me like concrete from 25 feet up, driving the air from my lungs and sending shock waves of pain through my entire body. The cold Pacific water enveloped me immediately, filling my nose and mouth as I plunged deep beneath the surface. Above me, through the murky water, I could see the yacht's lights growing smaller as Alexander and Sophia made their escape, leaving me to die alone in the vast emptiness of the ocean. But they had made one critical error in their calculations. They had underestimated exactly who they were trying to kill.
The cold hit me first, a shock so severe it nearly caused me to inhale water reflexively. I fought the instinct to panic, forcing my mind to work through the fog of adrenaline, pain, and terror. The surface. I needed to reach the surface before my lungs gave out. I kicked desperately upward, my lungs burning with the need for oxygen, until I broke through into the night air with a gasping, choking breath that tasted like salvation. The yacht was already several hundred yards away, its lights receding into the darkness like dying stars. For one desperate moment, I considered screaming for help, but reality crashed over me as brutally as the cold water. No one would hear me over the yacht's engines, and the only people who knew I was here had just tried to murder me. I was completely alone in the open Pacific Ocean, at night, at least 120 miles from the nearest land. The statistics my analytical mind automatically calculated offered little hope. Survival time in 60-degree water varied from 1 to 6 hours, depending on body fat and fitness level. The likelihood of rescue in open ocean was virtually zero. Dehydration would become critical within days, assuming I could even stay afloat that long. But I had advantages my would-be killers didn't know about. I had been a competitive swimmer through college, not Olympic level, but skilled enough to earn a partial scholarship that helped pay my tuition. More importantly, I had prepared for exactly this scenario, however hastily. I reached under my shirt for the waterproof pouch, my fingers numb but still functional. Inside was the GPS beacon, which I activated immediately. The tiny red light began blinking steadily, sending out an emergency signal. Whether anyone would pick up that signal this far from shipping lanes was another question entirely. The satellite phone was my backup communication, but I needed to preserve its battery for when I might have the best chance of rescue. For now, I focused on the most immediate threat, hyperthermia. I needed to conserve energy while staying warm enough to survive until dawn. I switched to a relaxed backstroke, focusing on keeping my face above water while expending minimal energy.
The technique my college swim coach had drilled into us countless times now meant the difference between life and death. As I floated on my back, staring up at the vast canopy of stars, unmarred by light pollution, my mind cycled through a tornado of emotions. Disbelief at the complete betrayal by the two people I had trusted most. Rage at their callous planning of my murder. Fear of my current circumstances. But beneath it all, burning like a flame that refused to be extinguished, was a steel determination to survive. Not just to live, but to make them face justice for what they had done. Hours passed in a blur of cold, exhaustion, and stubborn persistence. My teeth chattered uncontrollably despite my efforts to stay warm. My limbs grew increasingly numb, making it harder to maintain proper swimming form. I thought about the survival training I had taken during a corporate retreat 3 years earlier. Our instructor, a former Navy SEAL named Jack Martinez, had emphasized mental fortitude above all physical preparation. Your mind will give up before your body, he had said. Tell yourself you can last another minute, then another, then another. Break survival down into manageable increments. So that's exactly what I did. One more minute floating. One more cycle of controlled breathing. One more look at the constellation of stars above me. I turned survival into a series of small victories instead of an impossible mountain to climb. The night seemed endless, but eventually the black sky began to lighten almost imperceptibly in the east. Dawn brought new challenges along with hope. The rising sun would help me maintain body temperature, but it would also accelerate dehydration without protection from its rays. I continued swimming in a slow, steady rhythm, hoping to encounter something, anything, that might improve my chances of survival. A piece of debris, another vessel, even a floating log that could provide additional buoyancy. Mid-morning, approximately 14 hours after being thrown overboard, I spotted something floating in the water about 60 yards away. Swimming toward it with my remaining strength, I discovered it was a deck chair cushion from the yacht, presumably thrown overboard during our struggle or afterward to cover evidence. This small piece of buoyancy felt like finding treasure. I clung to it, allowing my exhausted muscles to rest while keeping my head safely above water. The cushion also provided some protection from the sun's increasingly intense rays. The day passed in a haze of thirst, sun exposure, and growing despair. I had been in the water for nearly 24 hours when I heard the distant sound of a motor. At first, I thought it was a hallucination, born of desperation and dehydration. But then I saw it. A fishing boat, perhaps 3/4 of a mile away, moving parallel to my position. This was my chance, possibly my only chance. Summoning every ounce of remaining strength, I waved the bright yellow cushion above my head and screamed until my throat was raw from salt water and overuse. The boat continued on its course initially, showing no signs of having spotted me. In desperate panic, I activated the emergency strobe function on my GPS beacon, which I had been saving to preserve battery life. The tiny light seemed pathetic against the vastness of the Pacific, but miraculously, the fishing boat began to change direction. They had seen me. As the vessel drew closer, I could make out two figures on board. A middle-aged man at the helm and a younger man, possibly his son, working with nets on the deck. They stared in obvious disbelief as they pulled alongside me. Dios mío, a woman alone in the middle of the ocean. How is this possible? The older man exclaimed in accented English. Help, I croaked, my voice barely functional after hours of saltwater exposure and screaming. Help me, please help me.
They pulled me aboard their boat, which I could now see was named Esperanza, Hope, painted in faded blue letters across the bow.
The younger man, who looked to be in his 20s, immediately wrapped a thick blanket around my shivering body. "I am Captain Miguel Santos," the older man said, his weathered face creased with concern. "This is my son, Carlos. What happened to you? Where is your boat?" I couldn't tell them the full truth. Not yet. Not until I understood the full scope of my situation and what resources I had available. "Accident," I managed through chattering teeth. "Fell overboard from a yacht. They didn't see me fall." Captain Santos and Carlos exchanged skeptical glances. A well-dressed American woman, alone in open ocean waters, over 100 miles from the nearest shipping lane, was not something they encountered every day of fishing. "No boats have passed through this area for 3 days," Carlos said carefully. "We have been working these waters all week." I closed my eyes, too exhausted to construct a believable lie, and too smart to tell the complete truth to strangers, however kind. Captain Santos, whatever his suspicions, was decent enough to prioritize my immediate medical needs over satisfying his curiosity. "Rest now, señora. Questions can wait. Carlos, bring water. Small sips only. And the first aid kit." Over the next several hours, as the fishing boat headed toward the Mexican coast, I drifted in and out of consciousness. The Santos family treated my saltwater sores, rehydrated me carefully to avoid shock, and monitored my body temperature as it slowly returned to normal. By evening, I had recovered enough strength to sit up and speak more clearly. Captain Santos sat across from me in the small cabin, his expression serious but kind. "Now, señora, you must tell us what really happened. We are 12 hours from port. The authorities will have questions, and your story must make sense." I made a crucial decision in that moment. These men had saved my life, but involving them further in my situation might put them in danger. Alexander and Sophia believed I was dead, and that gave me a strategic advantage I couldn't afford to sacrifice. "My name is Isabella Martinez. I used my maiden name instinctively. I was on a private yacht with people I thought I could trust. There was an argument that became violent. They pushed me overboard and left me to die." Captain Santos's eyes widened with shock and anger. "This is attempted murder. We must report this to the Coast Guard immediately." I shook my head firmly. "Please, I need to handle this situation my own way. These people are wealthy and well-connected. They would deny everything, claim it was an accident, and you would be drawn into something very dangerous." "But justice," Carlos began indignantly. "I will get justice," I assured them, feeling a new resolve crystallizing within me. Captain Santos, whatever his suspicions, was decent enough to prioritize my immediate medical needs over satisfying his curiosity. "Now, señora, you must tell us what really happened. We are 12 hours from port. The authorities will have questions, and your story must make sense." "I am Captain Miguel Santos," the older man said, his weathered face creased with concern. "This is my son, Carlos. What happened to you? Where is your boat?" I made a crucial decision in that moment. These men had saved my life, but involving them further in my situation might put them in danger. Alexander and Sophia believed I was dead, and that gave me a strategic advantage I couldn't afford to sacrifice. Alexander and Sophia believed I was dead, and that gave me a strategic advantage I couldn't afford to sacrifice. "My name is Isabella Martinez. I used my maiden name instinctively. I was on a private yacht with people I thought I could trust. There was an argument that became violent. They pushed me overboard and left me to die. Captain Santos's eyes widened with shock and anger. This is attempted murder. We must report this to the Coast Guard immediately. I named a figure that made both men's eyes widen significantly. Enough cash to buy them a new boat and support their family for years. After a lengthy discussion in rapid Spanish between father and son, they agreed to my request. The following morning, they docked at a small fishing village called Puerto Escondido, well away from tourist areas and major ports. True to my word, I used the emergency cash from my waterproof pouch to pay for a modest hotel room and gave them a substantial down payment on the full amount I had promised. I will send the rest within a week, but please tell no one you found me. My life may depend on your silence. Captain Santos clasped my hands with both of his weathered ones. You have our word, Señora, but be careful. The ocean gave you back to us for a reason. Do not waste this gift of life. Alone in the small hotel room that night, I finally allowed myself to break down completely. The tears came in violent, racking sobs. Grief for the people I had loved who had betrayed me so completely. Rage at their cruelty and overwhelming relief at having survived the impossible. When the emotional storm finally passed, I was left with a crystal clear sense of purpose. Alexander and Sophia had tried to murder me for money, and they believed they had succeeded. They were probably already celebrating their success and making plans to enjoy their blood money. They were about to discover they had made the biggest mistake of their lives.
Using the hotel's ancient computer, I accessed my emergency email account and sent a carefully coded message to Emma Allen, my assistant. Her response came within minutes, and I could feel her shock and relief even through the digital text. Oh my God, Isabella. I opened your emergency envelope yesterday after not hearing from you for 3 days. I've been beside myself with worry. Alexander and Sophia returned 2 days ago, claiming you fell overboard during the night while everyone was asleep. They said they searched for hours but couldn't find you. I typed my response carefully. They're lying, Emma. They tried to kill me. I need you to follow the instructions in the envelope exactly, but tell absolutely no one that I'm alive. My survival depends on complete secrecy. The Coast Guard called off the search this morning, Emma continued. Alexander gave a press conference yesterday. He was very convincing, tearful, devastated. The media is calling it a tragic accident. So, their plan was proceeding exactly as intended. I was officially presumed dead, and they were positioning themselves to inherit my fortune while playing the roles of grieving husband and sister. Over the following week, recovering in that small Mexican fishing village, I watched news reports of my tragic death on the hotel's television. Alexander's performance was masterful, his voice breaking as he described waking up to find me missing, the frantic search, the horrible realization that I must have fallen overboard. Sophia stood beside him at every press conference, her eyes red and swollen, a perfect picture of sisterly devastation. Isabella was everything to me, she told reporters, dabbing at crocodile tears with tissues. I don't know how to go on without my brilliant big sister. The acting was flawless. If I hadn't heard them planning my murder with my own ears, if I hadn't felt Sophia's hands pushing me into the ocean, I might have believed their grief myself. The most sickening part was watching how quickly they moved to claim my assets. Within a week of my death, they announced that according to my will and business succession plans, Sophia would inherit my personal fortune while Alexander would take control of my remaining business interests. The speed of their actions confirmed what I had overheard on the yacht. They had prepared these legal maneuvers months in advance, probably with the help of corrupt lawyers and forged documents.
Watching them claim the fruits of my life's work from that dingy hotel room, I felt a cold rage unlike anything I had ever experienced. This was no longer just about survival or even justice. This was about making them pay for every lie, every false moment of affection, every second they had planned my death. With Emma's help, I began assembling a team of people I trusted absolutely. First was William Gray, my corporate attorney who had opposed my marriage to Alexander from the beginning. When Emma told him I was alive, his first words were reportedly, "I knew that bastard was up to something." Next was Olivia Chen, the cybersecurity expert who had worked with me at Emoti Tech. Her skills in digital forensics and hacking would be essential for gathering evidence of their conspiracy. Finally, Lucas Hill, the private investigator who had already uncovered some of Alexander's financial crimes. His network of contacts in law enforcement and his experience with criminal investigations made him invaluable. From my hideout in Mexico, I began coordinating what I privately called Operation Phoenix, my return from the dead and the systematic destruction of Alexander and Sophia's plans. The small fishing village hotel room became my war room. I had dyed my naturally brown hair black, wore sunglasses constantly, and used the alias Isabella Martinez in all local interactions. No one connected the sunburned, dark-haired woman keeping to herself with the wealthy tech entrepreneur whose tragic death had made international headlines. My team assembled virtually, connecting through encrypted channels Emma had established using military-grade security protocols. Our first video conference set the tone for everything that would follow. Before we begin, I want to be clear about our objective. This isn't about revenge in the traditional sense. This is about justice and ensuring they can never harm anyone else the same way. William, his silver hair and serious expression filling one section of my screen, nodded grimly. What they did constitutes attempted murder, conspiracy, and fraud, but proving it will be challenging without direct evidence of their planning. "That's where I come in," Lucas said from another window. The private investigator had been working around the clock since my disappearance. "They're already spending your money, Isabella. New luxury cars, expensive jewelry, and the down payment on a vacation property in Aspen." "And I've been tracking their digital footprint," Olivia added, her young face serious beneath her distinctive purple-streaked hair. "Alexander has been researching countries without extradition treaties with the United States. They're planning to transfer substantial sums offshore within the next month." This information stoked my determination like fuel on a fire. "Then we work systematically," I said. "We need 3 types of evidence. First, proof of their conspiracy before the yacht trip. Second, documentation of the financial fraud they're committing right now. Third, if possible, direct evidence of the murder attempt itself." Over the next 3 weeks, my team executed a methodical plan that would have made any military strategist proud. William reviewed all legal documents Alexander and Sophia had filed since my death, identifying numerous irregularities, falsified signatures, and suspicious timing that suggested premeditation. Lucas dug deeper into Alexander's background, uncovering patterns that made my blood run cold. He said he found 2 previous girlfriends who died under suspicious circumstances, both wealthy women, both dying in accidents where Alexander was the last person to see them alive. Neither case had enough evidence for criminal charges, but the pattern is unmistakable. "He's a serial killer," Emma whispered, visibly shaken by the revelation. "A specific type," I corrected, my voice steady despite the horror of the implications. "He targets wealthy women for their assets, and this time he recruited Sophia as his accomplice, probably because my will required a family connection for inheritance." Olivia's contribution proved perhaps the most damning. Using her advanced hacking skills, she managed to recover deleted emails and text messages between Alexander and Sophia going back over 18 months, well before my marriage to Alexander. "Look at this exchange from 15 months ago." The engagement is confirmed. She said yes yesterday. Of course she did. My sister always was naive about men. Be nice. Isabella is my ticket to solving all my financial problems and your ticket out of debt. How long do we have to wait? Until after the company sells. We want maximum value for minimum effort. Then an unfortunate accident at sea. Exactly. I can be patient for 1 billion reasons. Reading their casual discussion of my murder in black and white made me physically ill, but it also crystallized my resolve into something unbreakable. This had been premeditated from the very beginning. Every kiss, every declaration of love, every moment I thought we were building a life together had been a calculated step toward my death. Meanwhile, Emma coordinated the most delicate aspect of our operation, preparing the Hollywood mansion for my dramatic return. Using trusted contractors who believed they were installing a surprise security upgrade, she arranged for sophisticated surveillance equipment throughout the house and a specialized control system I could operate remotely. The mansion is ready, she confirmed in our final planning meeting, and I've confirmed through their social media posts that they'll be returning from their European spending spree this Thursday night.
I flew back to Los Angeles using expertly forged identification documents Olivia had procured through her underground contacts. My appearance was sufficiently altered. The black hair, different makeup style, and 20 pounds of weight loss from the trauma that no airport security or customs agent connected me to the presumed dead Isabella Brown. The night of their return, I entered my own home through a service entrance only I knew about, using biometric security Alexander had never bothered to change or disable. The irony of his arrogance providing my access point wasn't lost on me. Walking through the darkened halls of what had once been my sanctuary felt surreal and disturbing. Everything looked different now, tainted by the knowledge of betrayal. Sophia had redecorated extensively, replacing my carefully chosen artwork with flashy pieces that matched her less refined taste. In the master bedroom, I found evidence that their relationship was now completely in the open. Sophia's clothes hung in my closet, her makeup covered my vanity, her personal items scattered throughout the space that had once been mine. They hadn't even waited a decent interval before dropping all pretense of grieving. I set up my confrontation carefully in the dining room, arranging an elegant table for 3 with our finest china and crystal. At the center, I placed a beautifully wrapped gift box containing everything I had gathered over the past 3 months. Their death warrant, delivered with style. Then I settled in to wait, monitoring the security feeds on my tablet as their car approached the electronic gates. Alexander and Sophia arrived just after midnight, clearly intoxicated and arguing loudly as they stumbled through the front entrance. They stopped short in the marble foyer, noticing the lights I had turned on throughout the ground floor. "Did you leave these on when we left?" Sophia asked, her speech noticeably slurred from champagne. Alexander frowned, suddenly more alert despite the alcohol. "No. Stay behind me." He moved cautiously through the house, checking rooms while Sophia followed despite his protective gesture. Their confusion deepened when they heard soft jazz music, one of Alexander's favorite albums that I had started playing from the sound system. "Someone's in the house," he hissed, pulling Sophia behind him in a show of protection that might have seemed gallant if I didn't know his true nature. They made their way to the dining room, stopping dead in the doorway when they saw the elaborate table setting. 3 place settings with fine china, crystal glasses filled with wine, and that mysterious gift box in the center. "What the hell is this?" Sophia whispered, clutching Alexander's arm with white knuckles. That was my cue. I stepped out from the shadows of the adjacent room, wearing the exact same outfit I had worn the night of the yacht party. My hair was back to its natural color, my appearance restored as much as possible to how they remembered me. "Welcome home," I said calmly, my voice cutting through their shock like a knife. "I've been waiting for you." The color drained from both their faces so completely, I thought Sophia might faint. Alexander stumbled backward, nearly knocking her over in his shock.
For several seconds, neither could speak, their eyes wide with what could only be described as pure terror. "This isn't possible," Alexander finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're dead. We watched you drown." "I watched you fall," I corrected with icy precision. "You assumed I drowned. Rather a sloppy assumption on your part." Sophia let out a strangled sound, somewhere between a gasp and a scream. Her hand pressed to her chest as if her heart might burst. "You're not real. This is impossible. This is some kind of nightmare." I stepped forward into the full light of the crystal chandelier, every detail of my appearance clearly visible. "I assure you, Sophia, I'm very real, and unlike you, I'm not here to kill anyone. I'm here to deliver justice." Alexander seemed to recover some composure, his mind visibly working through options and possibilities. "Isabella, thank God you're alive. We thought we'd lost you forever. There was a terrible accident on the yacht." "Stop!" I cut him off with a gesture. "Let's not insult each other's intelligence any further. I heard you planning my murder in Alexander's study. I felt Sophia's hands pushing me off that yacht. I know about the forged documents, the offshore accounts, the deleted text messages, everything." "You can't prove anything," Sophia said, her initial shock giving way to desperate defiance. "It's your word against ours, and everyone already thinks you died in an accident." I smiled coldly, an expression that made both of them visibly tense. "That brings us to my gift." I gestured toward the elegant box on the table. "Please, open it." Alexander approached the box cautiously, as if it might contain explosives. In many ways, it did. Just not the kind that created physical damage. He lifted the lid and stared at the contents, his face contorting with dawning horror and disbelief. Inside was a custom presentation folder containing 4 items that would destroy their lives as thoroughly as they had tried to destroy mine. First, a waterproof digital recorder, the same one I had hidden in our yacht cabin, which had captured their entire conversation about drugging me and staging my accidental death. Second, a flash drive containing all the recovered emails and text messages between them, dating back 18 months before our marriage, explicitly discussing their plan to marry me, kill me, and inherit my fortune. Third, comprehensive financial records showing their embezzlement and fraud since my death, along with documentation of the secret offshore accounts they had established to hide their stolen money. Fourth, police warrants for their arrest on charges of attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and a dozen other felonies. Warrants already signed by a federal judge thanks to William's legal maneuvering. "This is impossible," Alexander whispered, rifling through the documents with shaking hands. "How could you have gathered all this evidence?" "It was quite possible with the right team," I replied. "A team of people who, unlike you two, understand the meaning of loyalty and justice." Sophia suddenly lunged for the box, trying to grab the evidence and destroy it, but I was prepared for exactly this reaction. With the press of a button on my smartphone, every door in the dining room locked automatically with an audible click. "The police are already positioned outside," I informed them calmly, "along with FBI agents, since some of your financial crimes crossed state and international lines. I just sent them the signal they were waiting for." Alexander's civilized mask finally cracked completely, revealing the predator beneath. With a roar of rage, he flipped the heavy dining table toward me, sending china and crystal crashing to the floor in an explosion of sound and destruction. He charged toward the locked side door, then spun back toward me with murderous fury when he found it secured. Grabbing a steak knife from the scattered cutlery, he advanced with the clear intention of finishing what he had started on the yacht. "You think you're so clever?" he snarled, his handsome features twisted into something monstrous. "If I'm going down, you're coming with me. For real this time." But I had planned for every contingency, including his violent reaction. As he lunged forward with the knife, a hidden panel behind me opened, revealing Lucas and two professional security specialists who had been waiting for exactly this moment. They disarmed and subdued Alexander with the efficiency of people who dealt with dangerous criminals for a living. Within seconds, he was face down on the floor, his hands zip-tied behind his back, the knife safely out of reach. Sophia, seeing her partner in crime neutralized, collapsed completely. She fell to her knees among the broken glass and spilled wine, rocking back and forth like a child. "It was his idea. He manipulated me. I never wanted to hurt you, Isabella. He made me do it." I looked down at my sister, the person who had shared my childhood, who had once been my closest family member, now reduced to a pathetic, blubbering mess trying to save herself by betraying her accomplice. "I whispered in your ear before pushing you off that yacht. I told you to say goodbye to the world. Was that Alexander's idea too?" She had no answer except more tears and incoherent pleading. The police entered then, led by Detective Rodriguez, whom William had briefed thoroughly on the situation. They read Alexander and Sophia their rights as they were handcuffed and prepared for transport. Alexander continued struggling and making threats even as they led him away. "This won't stick. I have connections. I have lawyers." Sophia went quietly, still crying and trying to catch my eye, perhaps hoping for some sign of forgiveness or mercy. I gave her nothing. Some betrayals cut too deep for forgiveness. Some violations of trust too fundamental to ever repair. As the law enforcement teams departed with their prisoners and the evidence, I stood in my reclaimed home, surrounded by the wreckage of the confrontation. The dining room lay in ruins, broken glass, spilled wine, overturned furniture, a perfect metaphor for the destruction of the relationships that had once defined my life. But amidst the debris, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: genuine peace. Not the naive peace of someone untouched by betrayal, but the hard-earned serenity of a survivor who had fought back and won.
The seconds after Alexander and Sophia were taken into custody stretched into a strange, suspended moment. The dining room, once the site of intimate family dinners and holiday celebrations, now resembled a crime scene. Crystal fragments caught the chandelier light, scattering tiny rainbows across the walls like misplaced celebrations of justice. FBI agent Martinez approached, her expression professionally neutral, but her eyes conveying something that might have been respect. "Ms. Brown, we'll need your formal statement, but it can wait until tomorrow if you prefer. You've been through quite an ordeal." I nodded, suddenly feeling the full weight of exhaustion that adrenaline had been holding at bay. Tomorrow would be better. I need some time to process everything that's happened. After the law enforcement teams departed, taking the evidence with them, I was left alone with Emma, Lucas, and the security team. The mansion felt simultaneously too large and claustrophobic, filled with memories that would never be the same. "You shouldn't stay here tonight," Emma suggested gently. "I have a hotel suite prepared. Clean clothes, everything you need to rest and recover." I agreed without argument. The thought of sleeping in the bed I had shared with Alexander, surrounded by Sophia's belongings, was unbearable. As we drove through the empty streets of Los Angeles toward the hotel, Lucas briefed me on what would happen next. "They'll be held without bail given the severity of the charges and their obvious flight risk. The preliminary hearing will likely be within 48 hours. The evidence we've gathered is overwhelming, but their lawyers will try every trick in the book to create doubt." The hotel suite Emma had arranged was a blessing, a neutral,
anonymous space untainted by betrayal or painful memories. I showered for nearly an hour, as if the hot water could wash away more than just the physical residue of the confrontation. Afterward, wrapped in a plush hotel robe, I joined my small but loyal team in the suite's living area. "What happens now?" Olivia asked, her usual technological confidence replaced by uncertainty in navigating these very human consequences. "Now?" I said, settling into an armchair and feeling truly safe for the first time in months. "We prepare for the media storm. Once news breaks that I'm alive and that Alexander and Sophia have been arrested for attempted murder, it will be unlike anything we've seen before." I was right. The next morning brought a media explosion that exceeded even our worst expectations. The story had everything that captured public imagination: a tech billionaire rising from the dead, a husband and sister conspiring to commit murder, betrayal at the highest levels of society. William had prepared a carefully worded statement confirming that I was alive, that criminal proceedings were underway, and requesting privacy during this difficult time. Of course, privacy was impossible when dealing with a story this sensational. Every major news outlet, talk show, and true crime podcast wanted exclusive access. Social media exploded with hashtags like "back from the dead" and "billion-dollar betrayal." Old photos of Alexander, Sophia, and I at charity galas were analyzed frame by frame by amateur detectives claiming to spot signs of deception. The preliminary hearing was a media circus that required additional security just to get inside the courthouse. I attended wearing a navy blue suit, my posture straight, my expression composed. When Alexander and Sophia were brought in wearing orange jumpsuits and shackles, I looked directly at them, refusing to show any weakness or fear. Alexander glared back with undisguised hatred, his charm completely stripped away to reveal the cold-blooded killer beneath. Sophia couldn't meet my eyes, staring at the floor throughout most of the proceedings. The evidence presentation was devastating. The recording from the yacht, capturing their explicit discussion of murdering me, played in the silent courtroom like a scene from a crime thriller. Their text message conversations, detailing months of premeditation, were read aloud by the prosecutor. When the judge denied bail, citing the severity of charges and extreme flight risk, Alexander finally lost control. "This is all fabricated," he shouted, lunging toward the prosecutor's table before bailiffs restrained him. "She's lying. She orchestrated this whole thing." His outburst only reinforced the judge's decision and provided footage that would play on news programs for weeks. Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted questions about how it felt to face your attempted murderers, whether you can ever forgive family, what you plan to do with your reclaimed fortune. I paused before getting into the waiting car. "Justice and healing are not the same thing," I said clearly into the microphones. "Today was about justice. Healing is my private journey, and it will take as long as it takes." The months that followed were filled with legal proceedings, media interviews, and the slow process of rebuilding my life. Alexander and Sophia, facing overwhelming evidence and certain conviction, eventually turned on each other in plea negotiations. Alexander's legal team tried to paint him as a man driven to desperate measures by gambling debts and financial pressure. They claimed Sophia was the mastermind who manipulated him into the murder plot. Sophia's lawyers argued she was a vulnerable woman seduced and controlled by a sophisticated psychopath who preyed on her financial desperation and sibling jealousy. The prosecution had little trouble dismantling both narratives with our evidence and their mutual betrayal. Their text message conversations clearly showed equal participation in planning my death, and Alexander's history with his previous girlfriends established a pattern of predatory behavior. During this time, I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. I contacted the families of Alexander's previous victims, the two women who had died under suspicious circumstances years before I met him. "I can't bring back your daughter," I told Margaret Sullivan, whose daughter Patricia had died in a boating accident while dating Alexander. but I can make sure he faces justice for what he did to all of us. The additional evidence from these cold cases strengthened the prosecution's argument that Alexander was a serial killer who targeted wealthy women systematically. It also provided closure for families who had always suspected foul play but lacked proof. Throughout the legal process, I began working with Dr. Elana Ramirez, a therapist specializing in trauma and family betrayal. Our sessions were difficult but necessary, helping me process not just the physical trauma of nearly drowning, but the deeper psychological wounds of being betrayed by the people I loved most. The hardest betrayals to heal from, Dr. Ramirez observed, are those perpetrated by people who were supposed to love and protect us. Your experience was extreme, but the fundamental wound, shattered trust, is something many people understand. That insight led to one of my first concrete steps towards healing and purpose. I established the Phoenix Foundation, dedicated to helping victims of domestic violence and financial abuse, especially cases involving manipulation by romantic partners or family members. Why Phoenix? A reporter asked at the foundation's launch. I explained, because rising from ashes isn't just mythology, it's a process. Painful, necessary, and no one should have to do it alone. The trial began 11 months after that night of confrontation in my dining room. I had spent those months rebuilding not just my life, but my sense of self and purpose. The Phoenix Foundation was operating successfully, helping dozens of people escape dangerous relationships and financial manipulation. I had also returned to the technology world, not as an executive, but as an angel investor, focusing specifically on startups founded by women and minorities who traditionally struggled to secure funding. My traumatic experience had made me acutely aware of power imbalances and the importance of creating more equitable systems. Personal relationships remained challenging. The double betrayal had left me wary of trusting anyone beyond my small circle of proven allies. I maintained close friendships with Emma, Lucas, William, and Olivia, but kept most new acquaintances at a careful distance. The trial itself was a media spectacle that dominated headlines for weeks. Court TV provided gavel-to-gavel coverage, and legal experts dissected every piece of evidence on cable news shows. I testified on the fourth day, walking through the courtroom past a packed gallery of reporters, legal observers, and members of the public who had been following the case obsessively. Alexander and Sophia sat at separate defense tables, their legal teams having convinced them that cooperation might reduce their sentences. "Please state your name for the record," the prosecutor, District Attorney Sarah Chen, requested. "Isabella Brown, formerly Isabella Martinez." "Ms. Brown, do you see the people who attempted to murder you in this courtroom today?" I looked directly at Alexander and Sophia for the first time since the night of their arrest. Alexander met my gaze with cold defiance, still handsome even in his prison uniform, still radiating the charm that had once fooled me completely. Sophia appeared smaller somehow, diminished by months in custody. Her once perfect appearance was plain and institutional, her confidence completely shattered. "Yes," I answered clearly. "The defendant Alexander Wilson, who was my husband, and the defendant Sophia Brown, my younger sister." My testimony took 2 full days. I walked the jury through our relationships, the gradual discovery of their deception, the planning that led to their murder attempt, and the terrifying hours I spent fighting for survival in the Pacific Ocean. The most powerful moment came when the prosecutor played the recording from the yacht cabin. Hearing Alexander and Sophia's voices discussing my murder in that sterile courtroom, with my would-be killer sitting just feet away, was surreal and devastating. "Once it's done, how soon can we access the funds?" Sophia's voice asked through the courtroom speakers. "The succession plan transfers control immediately in case of accidental death." Alexander's voice replied, Isabella updated her will after the acquisition, naming you as sole heir since we have no children. Several jurors visibly recoiled when they heard Sophia respond, and they'll never find her body in the open ocean. Perfect accident. During cross-examination, Alexander's attorney tried to suggest I had fabricated the evidence somehow, that my survival was so improbable it must have been staged. The tactic backfired spectacularly when the prosecutor presented testimony from Captain Santos and his son Carlos, the fisherman who had rescued me. The woman we pulled from the ocean was dying. Captain Santos testified through an interpreter. No person could fake the hypothermia, the saltwater sores, the exhaustion we saw. She nearly died in our boat before we could get her to medical attention. Sophia's defense attorney attempted a different strategy, portraying her as a victim of Alexander's manipulation. During her testimony, she claimed Alexander had threatened her if she didn't participate in the murder plot. He said he would kill me too if I didn't help him, she sobbed on the witness stand. I was terrified. I didn't know what else to do. The prosecutor destroyed this narrative during cross-examination by presenting the text messages between them, showing Sophia's eager participation and even suggestions for how to make the murder look more convincing. Did Mr. Wilson force you to write this text message? The prosecutor asked, reading from evidence. Quote, maybe we should drug her first to make sure she can't swim to safety. Is that the message of someone being coerced? Sophia had no good answer, breaking down completely on the witness stand. Alexander chose not to testify on his own behalf, probably a wise decision given the overwhelming evidence against him. However, his silence allowed the prosecutor to paint him as an unrepentant predator who refused to show any remorse for his actions. The prosecution's closing argument was devastating. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is about the most fundamental betrayal imaginable. Isabella Brown loved these defendants with all her heart. She supported her sister financially for years. She trusted her husband with her fortune and her life. Their response was to plot her murder with the cold calculation of professional assassins. The defense team's closing arguments were weak by comparison. They couldn't overcome the audio recording, the text messages, the financial evidence, and the testimony of the fisherman who had rescued me. The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours, a remarkably short time for such a complex case. When they returned with guilty verdicts on all major charges, I felt a sense of completion I hadn't experienced since before the yacht trip. Alexander showed no emotion as the verdicts were read, maintaining his cold composure even as his life was effectively ended. Sophia collapsed in sobs, finally understanding that her choices had irreversible consequences. At sentencing 3 weeks later, I chose to give a victim impact statement. I had wrestled with this decision for days, unsure whether I wanted to face them one final time. Standing at the podium, looking out at the packed courtroom, I felt a strange sense of peace. Your Honor, what these defendants did to me was unspeakable. They didn't just try to take my life, they tried to steal my death, to make it serve their greed while denying me any dignity or peace. I turned to face Alexander and Sophia directly. But they failed. They failed because they underestimated who I am beyond my bank account. They saw only what they wanted from me, never bothering to learn about my strength, my intelligence, my capacity to survive. My voice remained steady as I continued. I don't forgive them. Forgiveness would require them to feel genuine remorse, which they clearly don't. But I also don't hate them anymore. Hatred would give them power over my future that I refuse to grant them. Your Honor, I ask that you sentence them to the maximum penalty allowed by law, not out of vengeance, but to protect other potential victims. Alexander Wilson is a predator who has killed before and will kill again if given the opportunity. Sophia Brown chose greed over family loyalty and murder over morality. They both deserve to face the full consequences of their choices. The judge, clearly moved by my statement and disgusted by the defendant's actions, sentenced Alexander to life in prison without the possibility of parole for attempted murder and conspiracy. His history with previous victims and complete lack of remorse made him too dangerous to ever release. Sophia received 25 years to life, with the possibility of parole after serving a minimum of 20 years. Her cooperation with prosecutors and secondary role in the conspiracy earned her a slightly reduced sentence, but she would likely spend the rest of her productive years in prison. As the bailiffs let them away for the final time, Sophia turned back toward me with tears streaming down her face. "Isabella," she called out, her voice breaking. "I'm sorry. I know you'll never forgive me, and you shouldn't. I wouldn't forgive me either." For just a moment, I glimpsed something that might have been genuine remorse in her eyes, the first real emotion I had seen from her throughout the entire ordeal. I didn't respond. Some wounds went too deep for words to bridge, some betrayals too fundamental for any apology to address. The sister I had loved was gone, replaced by a stranger who had chosen money over family, murder over morality. The courtroom door closed behind them, and with it, I closed the door on that chapter of my life.
6 months after the sentencing, I stood on the deck of a modest yacht, not the ostentatious vessel where I had nearly died, but a smaller, more practical boat I had chartered for a very specific purpose. The Pacific stretched before me, the same waters that had nearly claimed my life, now glittering peacefully in the morning sun. This time, I wasn't a victim, but the captain of my own journey, both literally and metaphysically. "Are you sure about this?" Emma asked, standing beside me at the railing. She had remained not just my assistant, but one of my closest friends throughout the entire ordeal, her loyalty proving unshakable when everything else in my life crumbled. "I need to reclaim this space," I replied, looking at the GPS coordinates that marked the approximate location where I had been thrown overboard. Not to relive the trauma, but to write a new ending to that story. I had brought white roses with me, one for each month of my recovery and rebuilding. One by one, I dropped them into the water, watching them float away on the gentle current. "This first one is for the naive woman who trusted too easily," I said, releasing the flower. "She died in these waters, but her death wasn't meaningless. It gave birth to someone stronger." With each rose, I released another piece of the pain, the betrayal, the fear that had haunted me for over a year. The final rose I held longer, considering its meaning. "And this one is for the future, for all the people the Phoenix Foundation will help, all the investments that will support underrepresented entrepreneurs, all the good that can come from surviving the worst." As the last rose joined the others on the water, I felt a profound sense of peace settle over me. Not the innocent peace of someone untouched by tragedy, but the hard-earned serenity of a survivor who had faced the darkness and emerged into light. Back on land, I continued building the life I wanted, rather than the one others had tried to force upon me. The Phoenix Foundation had grown into a national organization, helping thousands of people escape dangerous relationships and rebuild their lives. My investment portfolio supported over 40 promising startups, many founded by entrepreneurs who had been overlooked by traditional venture capital firms because of their gender, race, or unconventional backgrounds. I had also begun speaking publicly about my experience, not as a victim seeking sympathy, but as someone who had transformed trauma into purpose. My memoir, Rising from Betrayal, When Family Becomes the Enemy, became a bestseller and connected me with survivors of similar experiences worldwide. The speaking engagements were challenging but meaningful. At a Phoenix Foundation event in Chicago, I told an audience of domestic violence survivors, the most important lesson I learned is that while trust can be shattered catastrophically, it can also be rebuilt deliberately, not as a naive default setting, but as a conscious choice based on evidence and boundaries. I paused, looking at the faces in the crowd, people who understood betrayal intimately. And paradoxically, that kind of carefully considered trust creates stronger, more authentic relationships than the blind faith I once offered so freely. Personal relationships remained complicated, but were slowly improving. I had begun dating carefully, taking time to truly know people before allowing them close to my heart or my life. The process was slower than my previous approach, but infinitely safer. 2 years after the trial, I received an unexpected letter from Sophia. Prison had changed her significantly according to the photo she included. Gone was the polished beauty who once commanded attention everywhere she went, replaced by someone who looked older, more serious, marked by the consequences of her choices. Her letter was different from her desperate courtroom pleas. No manipulation, no excuses, just what appeared to be genuine accountability. Isabella, I don't expect forgiveness, and I'm not writing to ask for it. I've spent 2 years in therapy trying to understand how I became someone capable of planning my own sister's murder. The person who did that to you was broken in ways I'm still discovering. She continued, I can't change what I did or undo the pain I caused. All I can do is spend the rest of my life, most of which will be spent in this prison, trying to become someone different than the person who betrayed you so completely. The letter concluded, you deserved a sister who celebrated your success instead of resenting it, who protected you instead of plotting against you. I failed you in every way that mattered. I hope someday you can remember the good parts of our childhood without the pain I added later. You were always the better person, the stronger person. I'm glad you survived to become who you were meant to be. Reading her words, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Not forgiveness. Some betrayals cut too deep for that. But perhaps the beginning of peace with our shared past. I never replied to the letter, but I didn't throw it away either. It represented something important: acknowledgement, accountability, and evidence that even people who commit terrible acts might be capable of genuine change, even if that change comes too late to repair the damage they've caused. 3 years after the confrontation, I celebrated my 40th birthday, not with family. That concept had been redefined for me, but with my chosen family. Emma, Lucas, William, Olivia, Dr. Ramirez, and a dozen other people who had proven their loyalty through actions rather than blood relations. We gathered at a restaurant overlooking the ocean, the same body of water that had nearly claimed my life now serving as a backdrop for celebration. As I looked around the table at these remarkable people who had helped me rebuild from the ruins, I realized something profound. I used to think family meant the people you were born to, but I've learned that real family consists of the people who choose to stand by you when the world falls apart, who help you rebuild when everything seems lost, who celebrate your victories and support you through defeats. I looked each of them in the eye. Thank you for being my real family. As we toasted to second chances and new beginnings, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. Alexander was serving his life sentence in a maximum security prison, his charm and manipulation finally powerless behind steel bars and concrete walls. Sophia was learning to live with the consequences of her choices, hopefully growing into someone better than the person who had betrayed me. And I was here, surrounded by people who had chosen to love me not for what I could give them, but for who I was. I had lost a billion-dollar fortune temporarily, nearly lost my life, and permanently lost the family I was born into. But in return, I had gained something far more valuable: the knowledge of my own strength, the clarity that comes from surviving the worst, and relationships built on genuine loyalty rather than obligation or greed. The ocean that had nearly claimed my life stretched endlessly beyond the restaurant windows, no longer a symbol of fear, but of possibility. Like that vast body of water, life offered both dangers and opportunities, storms and calm seas, depths that could drown you and currents that could carry you to safety.
The choice was mine to make about which waters to navigate and which harbors to call home. That night, as I stood on my apartment balcony looking out at the lights of ships crossing the bay, I thought about Captain Santos's words from that day he had rescued me. The ocean gave you back to us for a reason. Do not waste this gift of life. I hadn't wasted it. Every day since climbing aboard his fishing boat, I had worked to justify that second chance. The Phoenix Foundation would help thousands more people escape dangerous relationships. My investments would support entrepreneurs who might otherwise never get the opportunity to build their dreams. My story would inspire others to find strength they didn't know they possessed. Most importantly, I had learned to distinguish between the love that asks nothing of you except to be yourself and the kind that demands you sacrifice everything for someone else's benefit. Real love, the kind worth having, makes you stronger, not weaker. It builds you up rather than tearing you down. As I prepared for sleep that night, I felt something I hadn't experienced since before my marriage to Alexander. Complete peace with who I was and excitement about who I was becoming. The naive woman who trusted too easily was gone, replaced by someone wiser, stronger, and far more discerning. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to help others, new chances to build something meaningful from the ashes of betrayal. I was ready for all of it. The last thing I did before turning off the lights was check the Phoenix Foundation's emergency hotline. 3 new messages from people who needed help escaping dangerous situations. 3 more chances to make sure my survival story became their survival story too. In the darkness of my bedroom, I smiled. Alexander and Sophia had tried to end my story in those Pacific waters, but they had only succeeded in giving it a new beginning. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do to someone who tries to destroy you is to thrive in spite of them, to take their worst intentions and transform them into your greatest strengths. The ocean had returned me to life with a purpose, and I intended to fulfill that purpose as long as I drew breath. What's your story of overcoming betrayal and finding strength you didn't know you had? Have you ever had to rebuild your life after discovering the people closest to you weren't who you thought they were? Share your experience in the comments below. Every story of survival strengthens others who are still fighting their way back to the surface. And if my story resonated with you, please like this video, subscribe to Revengenius for more tales of justice and resilience, and share it with someone who might need to be reminded of their own incredible strength. Thank you for witnessing my journey from victim to survivor to victor. Until next time, keep rising.